You're listening to Media Savvy Moms with Melody and Marilyn, a podcast by Parents Aware, your go-to for information on how to talk to kids and teens about pornography and healthy sexuality.
Welcome back to Media Savvy Moms. Today we will be talking about why dads are so important in the fight against pornography and how dads can get involved. We have with us Executive Director and co-founder of Strength to Fight, Josh Gilman. He is a longtime friend of both Melody and me. He is a dad to 4 young kids. They keep him extremely busy along with his work. For fun, he gets involved in politics, and in his spare time, he runs large political campaigns. So he says that he aspires to have hobbies one day, and for now, downtime means playing a bit of Mario Kart with his wife, which she consistently beats him at. So welcome, Josh, and glad to have you here.
Thank you.
I'll turn the time over to Melody to continue.
Wow, that was... Does that sound about right? Was that a good introduction, Josh?
That's fairly accurate. That is, yeah. Especially the losing at Mario Kart part. But we always say humility is a big deal in this world, so I'll take it.
Awesome. We love Josh. Josh is a big part of bringing Marilyn and me together. Actually, you interviewed me, and Marilyn heard my interview on the Strength to Fight podcast, and she contacted me. Did you know this?
I didn't even know this. No, I don't think so.
I was getting rather downhearted in Media Savvy Moms and felt like I just wasn't making an impact, and I had tried to start a forum and I had a website and just was getting nowhere. And Marilyn heard me talk on the Strength to Fight podcast, and she said, I think we have a common goal. Want to start a podcast with 2 moms talking? And I was like, okay. And here we are. So thank you,
I didn't
Josh.
know that.
Yeah, it's true.
I thought it was really cool you guys started working together because I'm big fans of both of you, but I had no idea that that's how it happened.
Yep, that's it. And I thought actually it'd be pretty fun to, as a throwback, to put both of our Strength to Fight podcast interviews up with the show notes. So we can go back and listen to both of us before we started doing this. So we'll probably do that with the podcast notes for the show.
That's awesome.
What about you? How did you get started, Josh? Why did you enter this fight against pornography?
I have a fairly normal story myself in terms of getting pulled into an online porn addiction when I was young. I mean, I always tell people I'm so statistically normal. Saw pornography for the first time. Literally stumbled across a magazine in the street when I was 8. When I was 14, the internet was becoming what it is. And, navigating the internet without stumbling across pornography was even more difficult than navigating my neighborhood when I was younger. And I think you guys have interviewed Paul Laverne, another mutual friend. And I remember telling him my story, and he summed it up the best because I didn't have any type of specific trauma in my life or anything that people often associate with, any type of addiction. And he just said oh, you're a biological addict. And that phrase kind of clarified my story for me. Right, I encountered some content that is designed to be addictive, to create these habits. And that's what happened to me. Mm-hmm. And it's super normal, unfortunately. And so that had an impact on my life all through my teen years into my early 20s. I had a whole journey in terms of how I got out of it, and I was just really happy that it was a story about my past, not my present. By the time I was in my mid 20s, and I was just glad that when people talk about pornography, that I could say yes, that's something I was struggling with, I was addicted to. And that wasn't something that I was currently addicted to, currently struggling with. And I was just happy to leave it there. Mm-hmm. But then where I live in Ottawa, in the capital of Canada, for anybody who doesn't know where that is, there was a big incident where the University of Ottawa, the entire hockey team was suspended for an alleged group sex assault. And all of a sudden, rape culture was the most talked about term in the city. It was all over the talk radio and the newspapers and everything. What is it? is it a real thing? Is it a term we just throw around when we want to for political gain? What's the deal with this? And so my brother and a couple of my friends, they had been already studying these issues from an academic point of view, from a justice point of view. And so they got permission from the university to do a huge presentation in the main student center, and they called it "How Porn Fuels Rape Culture." And they addressed how porn is connected to human trafficking. They addressed why they would use a term like rape culture to describe what's going on with pornography in our world. And then they had someone share their testimony of finding freedom and wholeness and healing and all that. And it went incredibly well. We videotaped it. I wasn't trying to be in the front of this thing. I was happy to help behind the scenes, help put up a couple of clips on YouTube. And we just wanted to share it with friends who said, hey, I wish I could be there and I'd love to see it. Instead, it got thousands of views. Some other organizations copied it, ripped it off, claimed it was their own content. We didn't care because it just spread it. More people saw it, and we weren't planning on doing anything with this. And then over the next 8 months, not even, we had 60 requests from across the country of people saying, can you please come talk to our church, talk to our school, talk to our community group, our parents group. And we all had full-time jobs. Many of us were in other types of ministries, charities, and it wasn't really on our radar. But then I was getting more and more involved as it was going. And eventually, a couple of guys met up with me and we were talking, and they said, hey, we've been praying about it, and we feel like you need to quit your job and go full time with this. And I was kind of like, that's cool. What if I prayed about it? Maybe I'll talk to my wife about whether I quit my job. And then I did. We really, there was a couple important conversations that we had, but honestly, a big part of it was my wife and we had just had our first daughter. She was 6 months old. And I said, look, I know my story is so normal, age 8. And, I really hope that my daughter is the one in whatever that doesn't see pornography, that isn't impacted by it personally, but who's she going to marry? And even if we're we somehow perfectly parent, nobody parents better than us. Even if we do that, I don't know where her husband is out there. And I have 8 years then, or 7.5, to change the world enough that he never sees pornography. And that was kind of the thing that made us go, yeah, I think we just have to try. And that's how Strength to Fight started.
Wow. So basically, your motivation to join the fight was fatherhood. I mean, a big part of it.
Yeah, it was a big part. In terms of why do I have to? I think we just saw there was such a need, and there's 100 different reasons. But in terms of why it was something personal to me, why I couldn't sit around and wait for somebody else to do it, that was a big part of it. It was all about my daughter.
Love it. Awesome. So let me ask you this. So in our society, we're kind of expected as moms, right, to be appalled by this horrible atrocity, by pornography, by exploitation, by hurting our children. But why do you think it's especially important for dads to be on the front lines?
That's interesting. I think it's really funny, actually, because to go a little bit, take a step back to your question, I get opposite comments from people on that, because I feel like in faith circles and church circles especially, it's only addressed as a male issue. And often if you do an event on pornography, it's a man thing, right? I get invited to speak to men's retreats and men's conferences, and then nobody's invited me to speak to the women's conferences, and not just because I'm not a woman. It's just not talked about. And then when you get into...
We know that's not true though, right? It's not just a guy problem.
Exactly. And then it's interesting because then if you get into, I'd say, I don't want to say the secular world, but it's if the issue is cause-based rather than faith-based, it's almost all women. And one of the things I was actually proudest of when we put on a conference a couple of years ago is that everybody who came from the church world was like, wow, there's a lot of women here. And everybody who came from like the justice fighting for women and children angle were like, wow, there's a lot of men here. It's like, sweet, it was pretty balanced. And so I actually I like to push on both sides of that question. Like you said, it's not just a man problem, not just a male thing. It's something that affects women just as much. But yes, you're right. Like if we do a parenting seminar or something, it's often maybe 70-30 moms. That'd be pretty normal. I'm sure you two have seen the same thing in any types of events that you guys do. But I think it's so important for dads, because a lot of how your daughters, your sons are going to see how relationships work is going to come from their dads. I always tell people, like, my goal with my daughters is that they are so secure in my love. And I'm not saying I'm perfect at this at all. This is just my goal. I'm not saying I've done this and I'm better than you. My goal is that if my daughter at some point in life has a guy say to her, like, no one loves you like I do. Like, come on, babe. Like, I love you. I want her to laugh in his face. Like, I want her to just completely laugh in his face and be like, you're nuts. And to me, that's the most important thing that I can do as a dad. And so in order to do that, I need to model what love is. And we know that pornography is the opposite of that, of what real love actually is. It sends terrible messages about how we're supposed to treat each other, about what sex is for, about all these things. And I want to model that, what real love is, for both my boys and for my girls. And I think that there is something that kids learn from their dads that they'll never learn from their moms. There's something in the example you can set as terms of like what to expect from a man in a relationship that only comes from dads. One of the most important things I think I've been able to do in this work is in going to high schools or youth groups and telling the story about how when I asked my wife just to date, not even to marry me, she asked if I was addicted to porn.
Wow.
And I was able to say, no, I was. That is my story, that I was dealing with that, but no. And she had seen what that does in relationships, and she had decided that no way was she even going to start a relationship where that was present. And I like to share that story and then watch all these girls kind of go like, hang on, I'm allowed to have standards. And then to speak to them and say, look, as speaking on behalf of the men who care, and then talk to them about what they should be expecting from guys, and then to challenge the guys, be like, you can set an example in your behavior this way, you can change how girls expect to be treated from guys. And so I think that can only come, the message on what to expect from men can only come from men.
That's a beautiful thing. I love that you go in and you tell these kids this, and so they think I'm allowed to ask that question when I'm dating. And that idea of modeling is so, so powerful for us as parents and as examples. So great answer to that question. All right, we're going to take a little break. And when we come back, we're going to find out what you are up to these days. We'll be right back.
When parents share with me their concern over a child struggling with pornography, I always recommend they check out Fortify. Fortify is an amazing recovery tool that can help your teen learn to develop their own plan towards success. It's easy to sign up, it's designed to engage, and it's free for teens. Best of all, Fortify is science-based and has a proven track record of helping thousands of individuals find happiness by regaining their freedom from pornography. Visit joinfortify.com/media savvy moms to learn more.
And we're back, and we are talking to Josh Gilman, Executive Director and co-founder of Strength to Fight. And in the first half, we were talking about his journey kind of into entering the fight against pornography and the importance of dads in the movement and modeling for our kids these days, healthy relationships and why that's so important. And now we're going to kind of get into, we talked about his past, we're going to talk about his present and find out what Josh is up to these days. So, Josh, what are you up to these days?
Well, I mean, we are recording this. Who knows when what life will look like when this airs? But at the moment, we're all locked in our homes,
Mm-hmm.
and so obviously, like any organization, we were ramping up our events and speaking and that type of thing this year, and that has obviously been put on hold. And so trying to at the moment, I mean, hope by the time this airs, I actually hope that we'll have a lot more moved online and been able to adjust as a lot of people are. And I'm really hopeful that'll help us, be a catalyst in terms of making this more effective in the long term. Personally, though, I've been focusing a bit more on the parenting stuff. Like I've done so many different types of talks in a lot of different groups, but going and talking to parents is what I'm really, really passionate about. And so what I'm most excited about is actually a book that I'm working on with a friend who's a phenomenal illustrator, and it's a picture book, and it'll be for dads. It is called The King's Daughter. Nobody steal it. I think I stole it. That is not the only book that's called that. And it's a story about a dad and a princess. And I hope that it opens up doors to being able to speak to dads, to families, about how we need to talk to our kids about really, really tough issues. And my main goal is always to give people the words, because I think a lot of parents know what they want to say to their kids, but they don't know how.
Mm-hmm.
And so I hope to start providing more and more content that people can read and say, oh, I just need to say this. That's a really simple way to say that. And not just about pornography, but about issues around sexual abuse, and to help parents understand that the main thing their kids need to know is that they love them, and there's nothing that anybody could do to change that. And I think it's something that we know, no matter what our kids do. Sometimes they try really hard to make us love them more, and sometimes they do a really good job of trying to make us love them less. But they can't actually change that. And we forget to tell our kids that sometimes. And so when things happen to our kids, when they do something or something is done to them that they think makes them less, have we ever told them that? And that's what I'm hoping to be able to work on. And that's what I'm really excited about.
I'm really excited too. I didn't know if you were going to talk about your book, but you guys, we have seen the rough draft of this book, and it is so exciting. It's going to be so powerful. And I texted Marilyn this morning, and I was crying reading this book. That's me. I cry a lot. But still, it's seriously so powerful. And I love, because you're talking about starting open, honest conversations with your kids, and we are all over it. I mean, that's what we do here. And that is the essence and the power of strengthening families. Like, that's where it's at. And this idea and this concept of embracing and acknowledging brokenness in children and talking through it and expressing unconditional love, like, it just doesn't get any better than that. It just doesn't. And it's such a place of healing. And anyway, I could go on and on and on about I can't wait.
If you may not have noticed, and you've never met my kids, you may not have, but my friend made the king look like me and the princess looked like my daughter. And so when he first sent me the very, very first draft, he said, what do you think about this for the characters? I may have burst into tears right then. And yeah, I'm really excited to have the conversation. And I mean, goal and Strengthify, our thing has always been to have safe, simple, not easy, but safe and simple conversations. So that was the goal with this, is to make talking about some of the very, very toughest things feel simple for dads, simple for parents. Right, because I think that for a long time in the movement to fight things like pornography and everything, people thought they had to really come at it with like crazy, bold words that would just shock people.
Mm-hmm.
And there's room for that. There's room, especially when we're fighting. I mean, like what they're doing with fighting Pornhub and MindGeek, that whole campaign, I 100% back up that type of campaign where they're shining a light on like true wickedness. But in terms of having that conversation with your kids, it needs to be really simple, because I think as parents, we also, like, we're terrified. We're not just terrified that about having the conversation, we're terrified that it might be necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, you talk to parents and you can tell when it clicks in their brains, I can always tell in a presentation when they realize that, oh shoot, I have no idea if these things have or haven't happened to my kids.
Yeah.
And so oftentimes they want to come up, those are the people who come up and argue with me afterward and say the statistics aren't real, the stories are told can't be true, because if they're true, they have to deal with the fact that they might be true about their kids. If the statistics are real, it might be true about their kids. And so you need to approach it in kind of a gentle way that makes it simple for someone to pick up and really grab onto the truth before they start really looking into their own life and their own family and wondering, is this something I need to deal with?
So many of the words that you're using, I saw in your book. Gentle, simple. Like that was what came to me was, that was so simple. And the thing was that we look at a lot of content in this work because I mean, we're parents aware. We provide information for parents to talk to kids about pornography and unhealthy sexuality. So we're looking at lots and lots of books and articles, and we're putting out podcasts. But this book is so simple. And I went, oh. And it doesn't give you a script to talk to your children. It just opens a door. And the pictures are so beautiful. So anyway, we could go on and on and on about just this book. But we do want to get to kind of the practical side of this. So we've talked all about you and what you're doing and what you're doing to be in this fight. I do want to just really quickly ask you, are there any men in this movement that have had a really strong impact on you as you've gone through your journey?
Yeah, a big one would be Ron DeHaas from Covenant Eyes. People are probably familiar with him. Just his story, his personal story about how he got into this fight, was really impactful. I was so moved the first time I heard him share it that afterwards I was in a lineup of people trying to talk to him and someone like bumped me in front of him and I grabbed his hand and the words that came out of my mouth were, one day we're going to work together whether you like it or not. And then I got pushed out of the way and I think he looked a little bit terrified. Since then I've had more deeper, more cordial and less aggressive conversations with him. But just his story of which he's told publicly many times, losing his family to a drunk driver. And then when he saw what's happening with pornography and he had been remarried and he had kids, and he said, I lost my family to one addiction. I'm not going to lose another family to another one. And I believe he put like all the money that he had been awarded in the settlement from the first case into starting Covenant Eyes. And it's just incredibly inspiring in what he's done for families. I think it's a big deal and I really admire him. And another person is a Christian author named Tim Challies. He's written a lot of content on fighting pornography. And then he's one of the first people that I saw really writing about not having sleepovers. And I can tell you, anytime we share that type of content, it is the most widely read, commented, and then both praised and hated from parents. And I've really admired the way he's addressed some of these difficult topics for parents and put a lot of time and effort, even though like he has said that like every year he has articles that get read, you know, in one day more than everything I've ever written has been read in the history of time. And yet it's like every year the content around pornography and especially sleepovers gets read more than anything else, even if he hasn't written anything new on it. And so he made a big impact in terms of my approach to some of these family issues.
Interesting. Yeah, it's funny. We keep coming round and round to kind of the different people we've talked to. Paul Laverne talks about sleepovers, and he, for those of our listeners who might have missed that interview with Paul Laverne, he did a great job. Number one, just one of the things you talked about, talking about brain science of addiction, and he also mentioned sleepovers as a clinician because he is a therapist of people who come into his practice and firsthand have told him about specifically sleepovers and not a good thing when
No,
it
I
comes
had
to
one
pornography.
therapist said, it was my brother, actually, she said this too. She said, if there were no sleepovers in the world, I'd lose half my clients.
Yeah, it's real. So yeah, if you get one takeaway, parents, from
send your
besides
hate mail to Melody and be like, how dare you tell me to tell my kids they can have sleepovers. Honestly though, if anybody wants to check out just Challies, that's his website, and just Google his articles on sleepovers, they really are very, very good. So
can
I'd
you
encourage
spell
parents to
that
check
for
that out.
us?
Challies.
Okay. Well, we'll take a look. We can link to that in our podcast notes. So we're coming right around to the end here. And thank you so much for our interview today and all of our great stories and input. It was just always so fabulous to have a chat with you, Josh. We are going to turn the time over to Marilyn for a little recap of our show.
Okay, thank you so much. Loved listening in. So, just to recap, before we get our challenge from Josh, he talked about being statistically normal. So I think that's really important that we are aware that he talks bluntly and boldly about finding porn at 8 years old is a statistic normality, if I'm saying that right. So there's been a few experiences that brought him into this fight. One was his own experience as a child. The second being a very prominent event at the University of Ottawa. But finally, fatherhood was really the catalyst that made him want to change the world, and a few people pushing him into it as well. But the idea of getting dads involved, he talked about how important it is for children to see their dads talking about relationships and modeling relationships. And that's one of the biggest reasons that dads really need to be involved in this movement, and how men should be treating women. He talked about his goal personally is to provide simple, safe conversations about scary and complicated issues. So as parents, when he talks to parents, they're not just worried about the conversation about pornography, but that these conversations may be necessary to have. And so to help us as parents, he's created a book, and it's coming soon and we can't wait. And that book is going to be a gentle way to deal with these complicated issues. We want our kids to know that no matter what they do or what happens to them, that we don't love them less, and to make sure that they know that. It's really important. And finally, he talked about a couple of dad mentors that were influential in some of his decisions, and that's Ron DeHaas, founder of Covenant Eyes, and author Tim Challies. And we had that brief discussion about sleepovers. So really some things to think about. And let's get your challenge for our parents, Josh.
All right. Confess something, anything, any type of weakness, something you've done wrong. If you don't let your kids know that you have weakness, if you don't let them know that it's okay to tell someone, hey, I messed up, or I'm hurt, or something like that, then they're not going to talk to you in the same way. If we as parents think we need to be perfect and we model that for our children, then our children will think they need to be perfect. If we show them that strength is being strong, being tough, never showing any vulnerability, then that's what they're going to try to imitate. And so I always tell people, like, I never respected my dad more when he admitted when he'd done wrong, when he said, I'm sorry, I lost my temper, or I handled this situation in a bad way, or just, I'm struggling with these fears or these anxieties. I never ever respected him more than in those moments. And as parents, we're so afraid to show weakness. We're so afraid to be vulnerable. And yet that's what our kids need to see modeled. Because if we tell them, this is how I messed up, can you forgive me? Then they will know that it's okay to tell us, and that there's that love and acceptance that we need to be modeling in our family. So look for an opportunity to be vulnerable and to confess something to your children.
Thank you. That was beautiful.
Thanks so much for joining us today, Josh, and keep up the great work.
My absolute pleasure.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Media Savvy Moms podcast. For detailed show notes and links to any of the resources mentioned today, visit parentsaware.info. To connect with us on social media, find us on Instagram at Media Savvy Moms and on Facebook and Twitter at Parents Aware. We would love to get your feedback. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review wherever you listen to this podcast. Until next week, let's keep talking.